Our Professor Richard Wyn-Jones is Director of Cardiff University's Wales Governance Centre. He's been critical of the Welsh Government's approach to the crisis in our universities, including comments today on social media. Well, I asked him for his reaction to the news from Bangor University and the USW.
This follows on directly from news from my own Cardiff University, losing 400 jobs. This isn't the end of the story. I suspect that pretty much every other institution in Wales is going to be in the same boat, and I suspect they'll go back for more in the institutions where they've already announced cuts, because essentially the financial model that underpins higher education in Wales is broken. And there is no way for institutions to actually do better financially. So this is just kind of can kicking. This is not a fundamental change.
But isn't that the point that the market conditions have dictated this? The number of foreign students coming isn't the same. The money isn't there. There's not much the Welsh Government could have done about it, is there?
There's a huge amount the Welsh Government can do about it. The Welsh Government spent 1.2 billion a year on student funding. So they spent a lot of money in the area of higher education. What they've decided for a period of years is that, if you like, market forces can dictate where the money goes in terms of institutions. And they've allowed a situation to develop where now universities, on average, lose money on every domestic student that they teach. They've been relying on international students and their very large fees to try and keep the whole system afloat. The last UK government then made changes in visas and so on that's had a negative impact on international recruitment. So the whole pack of cards has collapsed. But the fundamental point is that universities lose money on their domestic students, and that's obviously unsustainable.
So what's the solution then? If it's not to lose these jobs and to close courses that don't make money?
Well, I mean, there's certainly, I'm not going to claim that university leaderships have got everything right. They clearly haven't. There's been a myth that you can kind of expand forever, which was clearly impossible. But the government decides what the size of the fees are. It also decides what it does with the 1.2 billion it spends in this area. So my view, for what it's worth, is that you can make that money work much harder. This whole cross-subsidy model where international students support domestic students, where students in cheaper subjects, the humanities and the social sciences, they subsidise people doing the expensive things, the medical stuff, the hard sciences. That whole model has collapsed. What you then need to do is actually pay, you need actually to pay the economic cost of the people doing the various courses. And that shouldn't be on the students, because obviously society needs medical people, it needs the hard sciences. So we've got to start again. This isn't, there are lots of other countries that do this. We've just gone down this kind of neoliberal route. Governments have been too afraid of raising fees, so we've ended up with the whole system basically collapsing around us.
So you're saying that if you're a medical student, you should be paying £60,000 a year?
No, I'm not saying that the medical student themselves needs to do it. I'm saying that society needs to ensure. We're spending 1.2 billion a year. The Welsh budget is what, 23, 24 billion? So a massive proportion of the Welsh Government spending goes on higher education related stuff. And yet all these institutions are collapsing. And I think the point to make about this is if you think about Wales as a country, Bangor, Aberystwyth, Wrexham, Pontypridd, Carmarthen, you take away the universities from those places and there's almost nothing left. There's literally nothing left in some of these places. So this is not just a crisis for the staff who are losing their jobs. Those towns and cities in Wales which are reliant on universities are also in for a kicking here.
Welsh Government, Vicky Howell's minister, said on Tuesday a further £19 million for the higher education sector. She's also said that she's asked universities to consider all options, including their financial reserves. Isn't that what they should be doing to prevent these job losses?
So just to give an idea of the scale, I mean, it's actually an embarrassing response from Vicky Howells. The cuts in Bangor alone today are 15 million. So just to give a scale, so one institution, Bangor, which is, historically a well-run institution, is saying 50 million. 19 million doesn't begin to cover the problem. And also, if you're saying spend your reserves, fine if that's in lieu of, something will change in terms of the funding model, but she's explicitly not talking about that. So if it was buying time, then some institutions, like my own Cardiff, has got some reserves. Others, like Aberystwyth, like Bangor, they're in a much, much more powerless position. So I'm afraid this is kind of performative politics. There's a deep crisis, and they need to address the crisis.
And very, very briefly, a few years ago, under the Blair government and subsequent Tory governments, there was this target of 50% of our kids should be going to university. Is it time to get realistic about that and send fewer children to fewer universities?
Well, there may well need to be a societal discussion about how we do vocational education, how we do higher education, how these things fit together. I mean, I think that the model that we have in Wales and in England and Wales and in the UK generally isn't a sensible one. But what we're seeing is, government standing to one side and allowing the collapse of a sector which will have massive impacts on communities right across Wales.
Richard Wynne-Jones there from Cardiff University, and there'll be more on the job losses announced at Bangor and at the USW on Radio Wales Breakfast tomorrow morning. It's 6:15.